Paranormal Punches is part of the Podbelly Network. Go to podbelly.com for more great podcasts.
Hey, y'all. This is Frank the Bigfoot, and you're listening to the Paranormal Punchers.
Welcome to a special episode of Paranormal Punchers. I'm Mark.
I'm Alicia.
I'm Nash.
And our special guest is Chaz of the Dead. Chaz, how are you?
Great. Thanks for having me on, guys. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. Now, Chaz wrote a book, and I'm going to read the title. Paranormal Expeditions, Hunt for the Friendship. A story of UFOs, Nazis, psychedelics, and an expedition to the edge of the world. Chaz, that is a title. That has so many things in. I'm like, just tell me this story.
Well, first of all, I want to say that was the best reading of the title I've heard.
It's like a movie intro sometimes.
To date. Yeah, I'm going to have to save that. That was gorgeous.
Thank you.
So, this was a project that I put together, came out October last year on Halloween. And it was my research and investigation into a UFO legend in South America. And it's the legend of the friendship. And one of the reasons I chose this legend to focus on was because it was kind of unknown in the English-speaking world. There was a couple articles here and there. Some podcasts touched on the subject briefly, but there wasn't really any kind of cohesive collection of information out there. So I kind of started putting that together and came across some other weird evidence and decided to go down there and investigate it myself. And I used some pretty unconventional methods to do that.
Well, I'm intrigued by just what you have in the title there. I mean, I'm like, all right. Nazis, UFOs, and psychedelics? Right on. Let's do this. All right.
I'm assuming that might be some of the unorthodox techniques, the psychedelics?
Yes. It's my personal investigation style. It's kind of controversial in the world of the paranormal. But it's the idea of putting myself or others into a altered state of consciousness to kind of try to meet the phenomenon halfway. Because through these reports of UFOs and even Bigfoot and ghosts and these things, there are these common symptoms, I guess you could call them, that occur. The bending of time is one example. The viewing of strange worlds. You have this Oz factor, which is this weird silence or ringing noise in your ear. All these kind of this list of factors that people experience when encountering a UFO are really the same factors that occurs to someone who's on a high dose or even a moderate dose of psychedelics. This space and time altering illusion happens to anyone who's been on a dose of mushrooms. I've stared at a picture I thought for a couple minutes and it's been hours. And, you have these common aspects that also seem to be involved with the paranormal phenomenon. So the idea behind this theory is kind of meeting the phenomenon halfway, putting yourself in that altered consciousness and then trying to interact with the phenomenon in a way that's physical, that produces physical evidence. And it's, an idea that harkens back to shamanism. And it's kind of this, in many ways, a lost science. I think the native peoples of America really understood using these tools in a way that's been completely lost. Or almost entirely lost. And it is doing my research kind of, shooting in the dark, trying to piece some of that back together. But I think it is a valuable avenue that not a lot of people are looking at. And that's why, some people have really taken to this research, and why some people have an aversion to it as well.
Now, what is the Friendship, and how did you hear about it, find out about it?
So the Friendship is this group of, I'm going to call them people, humanoid figures, let's say. They're all human looking. They're tall and blonde and conventionally attractive. And they're this group that seems to operate out of Chilean Patagonia, all the way in the southern tip of South America. And this archipelago, in Patagonia, there's several thousand islands just in the Chilean section. And supposedly on one of these islands, this group has a base. And from this base, they've supposedly healed people, and they've made these trade deals, and people have gotten rich. And supposedly UFOs are seen to fly to and from this island as well. And the people who interact with the group also have bizarre interactions with UFOs. And the biggest kind of connection to this is the group themselves, who they outwardly claim that they're extraterrestrials, that they're here from the center of the universe, and that they have warnings of against atomic weapons and those kinds of things. But really, when you examine their situation closely, they're much more neutral. Some people have been helped and some people have been hurt by this group. They're not quite benevolent or malevolent. They're kind of just doing their own thing. They seem to operate with a kind of disregard to us, pretending like they're here for altruistic means, but not necessarily so.
Wow. And and you just decided to travel all the way down to the southern tip, did you say, of Chile?
So I did. Well, there was a weird kind of synchronicity that kind of pushed me into pursuing this case. And I'd always loved to travel. And when I took on this case, I was living in Mexico City. So, I was already abroad and out and about, as it were. And there was one strange detail that really leaped out, and that was an investigator had found and posted it in an article this newspaper advertisement. And it was posted in this newspaper in Puerto Montt, Chile, which is a pretty small town, maybe a big town, small city, right at the top of Chilean Patagonia. And this private ad was written in English, and it said, to the Friendship, I'm the professional engineer who you visited in Sarasota, Florida 2 years ago. I didn't know who you were then, but I know now, and I would like to visit your island. Something to that effect. And that jumped out to me because I'm from Sarasota, Florida. That was my hometown. And, for whatever reason, it made the legend a little more real. Like this interaction with someone local kind of jumped out at me and really made it, for whatever reason, a more tangible case, a more interesting case. And I had to go down there and look into it.
Wow. Nash, you had something?
Yeah, I was going to say, because this reminds me of a bunch of different stuff. I mean, it makes sense that this is happening elsewhere, because we've talked about a similar tall, blonde aliens, like people, like humanoid forms. Was that the Mexican Zone of Silence?
Yes.
Yes.
Where do you?
Yeah.
Yes, there was that, and so it's like, so as you're saying this, I'm thinking, oh well, we talked about the Mexican Zone of Silence, and then of course the psychedelics. I'm like, well, I'm from Arizona, and the Navajos out there have been using peyotes and doing vision quests since forever. So I'm thinking this makes total sense, and to find something like this down south as far as Patagonia and Chile, I mean, oh my gosh, I mean, it seems to make sense. So that's fantastic that you were able to tap in and make the trip. and keep looking for the clues and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is the blonde kind of alien archetype is something that's been around really since the 50s and 60s when they were Venusians. They came from Venus and they were smoking hot blondes. And I think George Adamski was banging one, and there was a whole contactee movement, and that was all free love and space communism. And but the center point of that was these blonde kind of extraterrestrial entities. And then later on, even to now, we have the Pleiadians, and they're the same kind of tall, blonde, Nordic alien kind of stereotype. What's interesting about the friendship case is that it really came to fruition in the 80s, which is considerably later than the contactee movement in North America. So that was one of the kind of weird details, that these ones they're a little late to the blonde ET party. By the time they were showing up, people in North America had started seeing the little gray aliens. The mythology had kind of moved on. So it's interesting that it kind of started later and that it's persisted. It really did drop off in popularity after the 90s. There was a TV show, like a Chilean Unsolved Mysteries, that went and did an episode and investigated it, and it kind of dropped off in popularity. But there were these dedicated UFO groups who still were persistent in pursuing the case and making contact with the group. Some of them supposedly did and maintained contact for a while. And there's been all these independent stories and interactions where people are like, oh, yeah, I met some weird blonde people in Patagonia and they paid me in platinum and weird coins. And it was a bizarre, all these weird, bizarre stories keep popping up. And it's quite a bizarre legend that's continuing on.
That's pretty amazing.
So then you travel all the way down to Patagonia to start the investigation. Did you meet any resistance or anybody thinking you're crazy or not wanting you to maybe discover the friendship?
So that was one of the most interesting things I found about Chile as a whole, is that they're, I think, way ahead of the curve when it comes to just the acceptance of UFOs. People there are just like, the UFOs are here. They visit us all the time. They take the cows and sometimes they take people, but they really don't bother us.
You're right in there.
Exactly. And it's this kind of matter-of-fact nature. There's actually this really popular board game in South America. It's Tourist Mundial, and it's like a Monopoly, except you buy countries and you buy up South America and stuff. And the Chile tile is, an Incan guy and a UFO. That's just kind of what they're known for, is this UFO culture. And in the northern part of the country, you do have these deserts with super clear skies. Some of the world-renowned astronomy labs are there just because the skies are so clear. And, of course, a bunch of UFO sightings occur there as well. All around the Andes, which is up and down the length of the country, there's these the Andes Lights. Some people think it's an electrical phenomenon. No one's really quite sure what it is, but there are similar stories in the Superstition Mountains in Arizona. Similar stories in Brown Mountain in North Carolina, this kind of mountain lights, and Michoacan in Mexico. It's this weird kind of thing that occurs in certain mountain ranges. And then in Patagonia, I read a report from one investigator who cited it as the location with the most bizarre cases. One good example was a girl who got zapped by a UFO, came down from the sky, shot her with a ray gun or something in front of a group of people in broad daylight. It was like a mass sighting to this really bizarre kind of incident. And these weird kind of teleportations and things all seem to be occurring in Patagonia. In these really rural, isolated locations. So it was definitely a surprise to get down there and be like, oh yeah, people are, oh yeah, no, I know the UFOs. Oh, I've heard of the friendship. Oh, my friend, he's met them, and it's just kind of a matter of fact nature about UFOs.
Wow, that kind of reminds me a little bit of West Virginia.
Yeah,
because all kinds of craziness happened in West Virginia.
Oh yeah, down here in Florida too. It's,
Florida too. You never know.
Something in the water.
Now, what year was this that you went on this adventure?
So the bulk of the investigation would have been in 2019 when I was on the ground. I was there for just under 3 months.
Okay.
And it was up and down from Santiago down to Patagonia, and I investigated quite a few different UFO kind of locations and legends up and down the country before I made it to Patagonia. And one of the most bizarre and creepy locations I've ever investigated was a place called Villa Bavaria. And this was the former Colonia Dignidad. And there's a movie out there about it. But for people who haven't seen that obscure Spanish film, it's this was a clandestine kind of Nazi camp, I suppose. It was run by a man named Paul Schaefer, and he was arrested for molesting children in this camp. And he died in prison. But before that, he was a Nazi. And many Nazis who escaped to South America went to this place for refuge for a certain amount of times. Mengele was said to work in their hospital for a couple years. It was this kind of clandestine, out in the middle of nowhere area. And the Chilean government knew about it. And when they wanted someone to disappear or to be interrogated, they'd send them to the Germans, is what they said. And this is what they would put on their official documents. They went to the Germans, and they would never be seen again. And nowadays, this area has been rebranded as like a German tourist site. It's very creepy. It's very eerie. And it was a part of the investigation where, you know, it was more like journalism than paranormal investigating, because it was really had to keep kind of quiet about the whole UFO thing and whatnot. And for those wondering where the connection is there, I'm sure a lot of listeners have already pegged the Nazi connection to the friendship. They're tall, they're blonde. They all seem to be scientists in some form or another. They have these advanced medical practices. They're able to heal people and things like this. So naturally, people assume that perhaps this is just an island that is another Colonia Dignidad. It's another one of these clandestine camps in the middle of nowhere, where who knows what goes on. And to go to one of those, to see a physical example of that, definitely made that theory kind of more realistic. More reasonable. But again, it doesn't quite explain all the aspects of the case. Even if they were Nazis, you still then have to explain the whole Nazi UFO mythology. And there is a mythology there. But it is, you know, just one of the other weird aspects of this case. That was an interesting opportunity to look into.
Right.
Now, I know with the book, you probably don't want to have too many spoilers, so I'm just going to keep asking questions. So if there's one you want to save, read the book to get that, just let us know. But so you're down here. Did you, when you started to look for the friendship, did you find clues? Did you find their location? I'm very curious.
So I did interview quite a few witnesses. I came across quite a few new original stories, stuff that hasn't really been published before. I conducted some of my experiments and got some mixed results, some interesting, some spooky stuff, but nothing I would call solid evidence. There's no smoking gun from those experiments. But it was definitely a situation where I came away with a kind of understanding of the phenomenon. And it seems to be something that keeps interacting. The story isn't over, and I've actually published a few updates on my site as to some weird things that have happened after the book being published. And it seems the more I go out and continue to talk about it, the more the phenomenon responds. So hopefully, I've got two goals as of now, is to still get in contact with that friendship group. Through my valiant efforts, I did locate an island that is highly suspect. We tried to reach this island, and without giving away too much, there were errors and some possible normal influence that prevented us to get there, possibly. Read the book to find out. And if you want the location of the island, hit me up on Instagram or Twitter. I'll send it to you. I don't care. Like, please go down there and check it out. I'm all about that. I wish more investigators were like that, because I always hear these crazy stories and investigators sharing like, oh, I went to this location, it was great. I was like, oh, cool, I'd love to go check it out, double check everything you're saying. Crickets, There's no backup. No one wants to share their information. I don't care. If you want to go, please be my guest. Check it out. It is in the middle of nowhere. You will have to hire a boat. But it is that what I kind of want to get from this project is to get the story out there and to kind of bring more eyes and more investigators onto it, so that it kind of gets more attention. I think when you have that attention, that's when you find information. That the paranormal community as a whole, it should be a community. It should be a group effort that we work on all these cases kind of together. Something you don't find too often these days. Everyone's really holding on to their secrets, but it's to get out there and look into it and have other people work with you. That's where the progress is made.
So fascinating. Now I'm curious, when you're down there, investigating. Number one, at any time did you feel like possibly your life could be in danger? And two, did you see any UFOs?
So definitely in Villa Bavaria, it's just it's supposed to be a defunct camp. There's supposed to be no more Nazis there, but everyone is still of German descent. The only way to get there is to take you have to like hire a car and drive out into the middle of nowhere. There's a bus, but it only serves the staff, and it's kind of like a secret bus. It doesn't go to the bus station. It's this weird location. I definitely lied about writing a book. I was like, oh, I'm just here to be a tourist. And, I got up in the middle of the night and snuck out of the hotel to see if anything was going on and did some snooping and things like that. And that was probably the closest to physical harm I probably have gotten. They again, aren't supposedly doing anything illegal anymore, but they did find a weapons cache on the property, I think 4 or 5 years ago, this massive, stash of machine guns and things. So it's always kind of been this, oh yeah, we're okay now, quote unquote. It's still highly, highly secretive. So that was definitely a nerve-wracking experience. As for UFOs, while I was there in Chile, we took some weird photos, but nothing I would say is a UFO. I'm always a debunker first. I just hack it up to light anomalies in the camera. They did coincide with some weird paranormal experiments, specifically using those hallucinogens. So that is, it's bizarre. But kind of what led me into this theory, and this is also detailed in my book, was a very unconventional experiment. And that was kind of what got me onto more investigating UFOs. Like most paranormal researchers, and like my my Chaz of the Dead title implies. I started in a much more ghost, paranormal traditional background. And what kind of led me away from that and more into the UFOs and Bigfoots and the other paranormal aspects was this experiment that I conducted several years ago. And it was doing seances on a Ouija board while on mushroom teas, magic mushroom teas. And I did this
that might not go too well.
Well, yeah, people have mixed responses and reactions to that. But as you would expect, the results were pretty weird. I did them every weekend for about a month and a half, 6 or 7 weekends, which is too much in a short period.
Yes, I'm going to second that. I would say that is no, don't do that.
I would not recommend. I had some very bad physical effects, collapsing and stuff after that. So space it out further. That's some professional advice. But while doing these experiments, nothing happened. When I was actively under the influence of these drugs and performing the seances, nothing. The planchette didn't move. I didn't see any scary faces. It was the times just before I was drinking the mushroom tea, and in the portions in the middle of the week, I started to see UFOs. The first one I saw was right before I started sipping my mushroom tea, and experienced users know you need at least like 45 minutes to an hour before that really kicks in. I had just started sipping it, and I was watching the sunset, planes cross the sky, leaving their trails and stuff. And I saw one object, and it was getting brighter. It wasn't flickering like a plane, and it was getting brighter, and it suddenly burst into several smaller objects, kind of like a satellite re-entering and exploding. It was very bizarre. The smaller objects scattered and went in different directions. And I tried to find if maybe it was a satellite re-entering. I thought it was, maybe space debris or anything like that. But I found no reference online, no stories about it the day after. There was no other kind of recognition. So that was kind of the first weird one. And the one that kind of sold it was in between two of these experiments. Middle of the week, I was with a friend, and we were smoking a joint. So, take that as you will. I do that quite often, and I normally don't see UFOs. So we were smoking a joint, and I was telling him about this experiment. And he was like, oh, okay, well, that sounds crazy. Kind of just sounds like madness. And it does. I'm open to that criticism. And he kind of shrugged it off. And we begin to hear this low metallic hum. And there's these lights through the tree line. And one of us jokingly says, oh, maybe that's the UFOs now. We're like, yeah, sure. And sure enough, this triangle-shaped craft begins hovering over the house. And there's a light in each corner. And it's this massive triangle. And it's super low down. And it's hovering at a very low speed. And it's making this very quiet metallic hum. And I could have hit it with a baseball if I was standing in the street. That's how low down to the trees it was. And it kind of just hovered there for a minute and moved on. And my friend, who, he's a musician, and he might somewhat of a psychonaut, but he never really believed in physical extraterrestrials until that moment because, he was like, I'm not on any substances. And that was a UFO. Like, I have no idea what that was. And I actually spoke to him recently, several years after this sighting. And he was like, yeah, I mean, to this day, I still can't explain what we saw. I do think it was a military craft. That's kind of where he's leaning with it. But he does acknowledge that was definitely a UFO. And so that was kind of the moment where it was kind of confirmed. I had always heard the theory that, all paranormal phenomena is related. And I'm not necessarily sure that it is, but I think whatever facilitates human beings' interaction with paranormal phenomenon is the same. It's something about altering our consciousness. It's something at our conscious level. that occurs. It's where our mind blends with reality in these weird blips when other realities can leak in. And so that's kind of those weird realms is what my research focuses on.
Now, I'm sure you have to get a lot of pushback from people in the paranormal community, or probably any community, because I could be like, well, Chaz, yeah, you probably saw something in the sky. You just chugged a bottle of mushroom tea. I would see something in the sky. Do you get a lot of that when you're talking about your book to people?
Yeah, there's a lot of pushback, though, the people who are willing to actually hear me out and consider it, they get to the point where they're like, oh, okay, so, that person with you, he wasn't doing the experiments. He was a completely independent viewer, and he saw it as well. And again, that was an incident where I wasn't actively on the substance. It had been 3 or 4 days left over in my system, which weirdly enough seems to be something I've come across a few times in my research, that it's kind of the few days afterwards, after a heavy psychedelic trip, when these weird paranormal incidents occur. One investigator from California had like a full-on abduction experience in his room. He saw a bunch of tiny aliens, and he was convinced it had to do with the mushrooms he took a week ago. He was like, I don't know why, but I have this feeling that it has something to do with the psychedelic trip I had a week ago. And it seems to be this time period after that heavy trip seems to when it's just a little bit in your system, it seems to help you view these craft or these entities, whatever they are. As for the criticism, I do get a lot. Oddly enough, a lot of it, the psychedelics is only a portion of it. A lot of it's the Ouija board stuff. People are like, oh, you use the Ouija board, you're possessed. I can't follow your research. And, drugs and Ouija, this guy's a Satanist. And, it's this paintbrush I get hit with a lot. I hate to point fingers, but it does tend to be the more religious investigators. They're out there, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think we should move the field towards science. It should be a science, and we need to take it as one. So these experiments should be tested on merit, not on some weird sense of morality, drugs bad, drugs good. That should be a side factor. I just hope people look at the research, look at the weird connections and things that are being drawn, and work with it, contribute it. If you think it's wrong, I'll hear you out. Like, let's get into a conversation about it. What are the issues with it? I'm all in for criticism and having the conversation. It's the dogmatic denial that is that I'm not going to entertain, and I think we should leave behind, where this is bad because I feel like it's bad, is a weak argument.
Well, that was a lot to absorb. Now, in the book, so anybody who wants to check this book out, they're going to kind of be able to read and follow your journey down. All the stuff that we were talking about in the show, they can read it in depth. What else would they be able to learn from reading the book?
So the book it's in 2 parts, and the first part is all the research and weird stories, and not just about the friendship, just about UFOs in Chile. There's a chapter on Nazis and submarines washing up. There's a chapter on mythology and these legends, some of which do seem like early versions of the friendship and these weird ghost ship legends. So if you like weird history and spooky stories and things like that, the book's filled with it. The first half is all just weird history and weird stories. And then the second half is my experiences and my trip down there and the stories I heard firsthand and got from witnesses, and my weird experiments and things like that. So it's anyone who likes travel and weird stories, paranormal. It's filled with all that kinds of stuff. So it's a fun read above all. I hope it brings a good conversation to the paranormal world, and it's taken off in a way I hadn't quite expected it would. I definitely didn't expect it would, but I'm glad to be able to talk about it, and I'm glad people are interested. And let's find out more about it together.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also sounds like it would make a heck of a movie.
Oh yeah.
I know. I'm waiting for Travel Channel to hit me up. I'll do this for 9 seasons. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
How long have those Oak Island guys been digging that hole?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Give me a boat. I'll go island to island till I find these guys.
Chaz of the Dead, thank you so much for hanging out with us. This has been a lot of fun. Tell everybody where they can find the book or learn more about you.
So the book is Paranormal Expeditions, Hunt for the Friendship. It's available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. You can find me at Chaz of the Dead on Instagram or Twitter, as well as chazofthedead.com. That's where I post all my weird interviews and videos and writings, all that kind of stuff. Chazofthedead.com for that. Check it out. And if you like the weird research, buy the book. That's the best way to support it, so I can keep churning out weird stuff.
Chaz, thanks, man.
Yeah.
Appreciate your time. You have an awesome night. I'll put links in the show notes for everybody. All right, until next time, if it's not weird,
It's not worth checking out.